Hellblade Senua Saga. It's a game that has always been on my radar, but I've never dedicated the time to be fully immersed in the world and try and see what the game is trying to offer. With Hellblade 2 a few weeks away, I thought what better time to finally sit down and become immersed in the world that Ninja Theory has created. Hellblade is such a unique experience that I thoroughly enjoyed, and I can't believe it took me this long to play it. It tackles many personal themes to many players, including myself, mental health, death and loss, self-doubt and growth. Hellblade will be a vastly different experience for people who want to get immersed in the game, so I want to state that if you have any reactions to the themes or moments within this video or whilst playing, please go and see a medical professional. This game touches on psychosis and mental health a lot, so please go and do that before we discuss it. This is also the point in the video that I want to stop and tell you right now to go and play this game if you haven't already. The narrative portion of this game will cover some key moments and key elements of what I love so much, and I want to discuss those certain moments, morals, and get real deep, but I do not want to spoil this experience for you. Please go and play this. Pause the video, come back to it, or don't, or if you've already played, continue watching. This is your final warning. So let us now talk about my first experience with Hellblade Senua's Saga. We open up the game in a dense fog. As the camera moves forward, we are slowly introduced to our main character, accompanied by some narration and the many voices within Senua's head. These voices are a very real and key part to Senua's character, and you will hear these throughout the entire game. During combat, during puzzles, cinematics, they are the audio representation of Senua's psychosis. They are more known as the Furies as well, but I'm just going to call them the voices in this video. They react to everything she does, and in this case, what you do as a player. If you've ever decided to do something scary or walk around in the dark or done anything that you have had second thoughts over, the voices are that in Hellblade. They will often whisper lines of dialogue constantly, some angry, some making fun of the actions that you made Senua do. If you messed up in combat, they are always here. We see this right from the start of the game as Senua rows her boat through an area best described as pure death. Bodies are mangled everywhere, hung across trees, put on spikes. It's a brutal first impression of the game. All the time, the voices are telling you to go back, stop, and cower. The opening is also used as a very key design element to introduce us to the immersion within the world. Having the studio credits embedded into the environment means there's no HUD or anything like that. It just continues as you make your way through this opening section for a few moments. Eventually, you will reach a swampy bank, and here is where we take our first steps in the game, all while being told otherwise by the voices in our head. I will make reference to the voices a lot because they are not just some extra lines of dialogue, they are one of the key aspects of the immersion within the game and one of the best aspects that Hellblade brings to the table. The audio design is excellent, and we'll discuss more about that later on. As we progress forward, we are introduced to the next overarching theme of the game, the darkness. No, not the UK band, the entity that is a constant threat to Senua. Eventually, we reach this vast open area which has some pretty incredible visuals on display. A giant wooden structure that almost looks like a mountain, a wooden bridge, and a giant sandy beach surrounded by mountains on all sides. We learn about the narrative straight away thanks to the keystones that are found throughout the game and being introduced to a wild man by the name of Druth. He is going to be our guide upon reaching Hell. This is Senua's journey. She's trying to save Dillion, her former partner, that was killed at the hands of the Northmen. I think it's important to note here the mythology at play. There is a reference to Norse gods, especially Hela, Loki, and Thor, but Senua is a Celtic warrior, which is a completely different section of gods. But they are intertwined here for the purposes of the story, and it plays to the idea of abandoning gods and being parts of realms, etc., etc. The time period would be roughly the 8th century, meaning that the Northmen would be Norse in nature, being maybe Vikings in this specific time period, and that is where we get the Norse mythology, and they have invaded the lands that Senua lives in. They will also act as many of the enemies within the game. After some traversal up a slippery mountain, we make our way through to a secret passage that Druth is able to help us with thanks to the runes that are on the doors. These are going to be puzzles that are found in the game that we're going to be completing a lot. Essentially, you have to use your sight to find a symbol within the world, which will then unlock the door. We do this and we make our way to this massive runic door, which is to Helheim. Upon reaching the door to Helheim, Senua is denied passage. This is where it takes us into a combat encounter, which after killing our first enemy, Senua can do nothing. The enemy that spawns on screen kills you, and this is the end of Senua. Or is it? This is where we're introduced to the mechanic in the game called the Rot. The Rot will continue to creep up Senua's arm every single time you die. If it reaches her head, then it will be game over. This is going to be key in combat because you don't want to die repeatedly because you're going to be set back. Then as you get later and later into the game, this is something you're going to want to think about if you've died a lot. This is where Hellblade truly begins. We now have a goal, we have the stakes that are laid out, and we can truly make our way forward. I'm not going to talk about every single aspect and the entire journey of Hellblade because I would be here for a very long time within the video, but I want to discuss the narrative and some of the themes a little bit more, so let's dive into that now. Hellblade is not just a physical journey the player embarks on, it's a personal journey. We learn a great amount of Senua's past through various portions of the game, how she ventured into the wilds and how she met Druth and Dillian initially, how she fought the darkness in the forest, how her mother fought the darkness previously, how she had this curse upon her, which was like a plague that we find out a little bit more on, how Druth was enslaved. There's so much here, but the key thing is that it's not shown to us. It's heard through audio, so you have to really pay attention to siphon out the voices to understand what is being said and learn more about the overarching narrative. A little later on in the game, you have the voice of a shadow creep into her mind, and this is the manifestation of Senua's father interacting with her mother at certain points, and also learning about the relationship between Dillian and Senua. He even shows up, well, I say shows up, you hear him through dialogue at times, and there's a segment that you play out in the game where you're basically following his voice. All of these moments have shaped Senua's character. We embark on the journey for her to face her fears, face her past, and confront it. This is very clear during a trial section of the game where you go to different areas where there's some different puzzles, and it all goes on different themes that you are trying to struggle with. The game is very clearly a mental battle that the player is physically fighting through. The narrative plays with so many of these ideas, and each one is respected. I felt connected to every small journey that we took to advance the larger narrative. And one of the biggest ideas that they showcase in the game is the ability to let go and being okay with the result. The game actively wants you to face this at the end of the game. As a player, you learn this through combat, but you know once it hits and you understand why you have to fail, you say, I get it. I understand now. I love what the game was trying to teach me here. There are things you can fight, overcome, and move forward from to improve your own life. And there's also things that leave deep scars. You may never feel healed, and that's okay, because every person deals with this in life. We lose a loved one, we have a troubled relationship, we battle our own mental health, and even ourselves at times. This is what I felt playing Hellblade. The narrative taught me this so much, and I loved it. For every person, it'll be maybe different, and you may have a different experience, and you maybe will find a different meaning within the story. It sits easily as one of the best narrative games I've ever played, but not because the story is overwhelmingly great. It's because the story tries to teach us something about ourselves. It's simply incredible. Narrative is clearly the big draw of this game, and that's why I loved it. But there's something else that Ninja Theory has been able to perfect in this game, which is the visual and audio design. And I'm not just talking graphics or fidelity when I talk about the design. It's ingrained into the level design and structure. There is zero HUD in this entire game, which removes the need for any additional pieces of information that could detract from the experience. There is only one time that the game shows us any level of information, and that is a mirror that Senua has on her side. This has a meter which allows us to slow down time in combat, and you know when it's full due to it lighting up on the side of her hip. When you get hit in combat, the screen shakes and darkens for a moment. When you're on the ground, there is this white light that surrounds you as you're trying to revive yourself while dodging. Blood splatters when you slice an enemy in combat, but in slow motion, you can see the blood hang in the air for a moment. Small runic symbols will float in the air near the solution to where a puzzle is. A distinct flash and clang when you parry an enemy. During one segment, you have to run from a light spot to light spot, but every time you do, the camera starts to close in as if there's a shadow chasing you, and it creates this real sense of dread. There's so many of these moments in the game that increase the level of immersion because it's all within the game itself. It reminds me a lot of how Dead Space uses the UI on Isaac himself with the suit and your health. It's really great. This also extends to a level of immersion within the cutscenes itself, because the cutscenes put you face to face with Senua at times, or from the perspective of characters that she is talking to, not just looking at it from afar. It feels a little bit weird and uncomfortable, but it truly pulled me in because I wasn't just watching a movie or like a simple cutscene, I was a part of it. The game also has this dirty, gritty and grime in places, and it leans heavily into these dark fantasy elements with characters and their enemy design. Now, if we talk about audio, I don't know where to start. It's quite frankly one of the best audio experiences I can think of in any game I've ever played, and it seems to be getting that much better in Hellblade 2 in a couple of weeks' time. The voices and the shadow are so distinctly different in tone, one being this deep bellowing voice and the other being these soft whispers in the background. Ninja Theory utilizes this panned audio absurdly well, having the ability to have one voice in one ear, say your left ear, and the other in the right. It actively gives you a feeling of internal dialogue, but out loud. I make no exaggeration to say that it is spine-chilling and makes my skin crawl due to the way that it's implemented. There is one point in the game where you confront yourself and the voices disappear besides the shadow. It felt weird because you grow accustomed to this as constant dialogue and you weirdly want them back. This is a very important and real example of what psychosis must feel like. I've never had it myself, but they've got a mental health coordinator on the team at Ninja Theory that I can only imagine has very much informed the developers of what this is like. They've also done series on their YouTube, and I think it's very important they've done this, and it's why I think I love this so much, because it showcased the very real condition that many people suffer with. The dialogue for these voices as well are also incredible. There are times that they will laugh at you when you miss an attack. They'll try and fill you in dread when walking across traversal segments like a beam or a gap, saying, "Quickly, quickly, go faster." We all have these thoughts and they're being spoken out loud here, and they can be uncomfortable in this specific situation, but it enhances the entire experience. Hell, watching the trailers for the sequel gave me the same exact effect from a trailer. Without narrative and audio-visual design, I don't think Hellblade would be remembered as fondly as it does today. The reason I say this is because combat and the game's structure isn't groundbreaking by any means, and a majority of time is serviceable to the story. Each area of the game follows a simple design. You find a runic door, you then do another puzzle, then into a combat encounter, and maybe another puzzle, and then like a boss encounter. The doors are usually unlocked within the world, and obviously you're going to be doing some traversal as well. And in the later portion of the game, there's more puzzle elements with this trials section. There isn't anything bad about how the game is actually structured, and if it was longer than 10 hours or so, I think it would start to be a real problem. However, the game's visual design, I've previously spoken about, gives the players hints on rune locations and matches up what you see, and these are varied enough in multiple areas of the game, mainly the puzzles, for it to be good. For example, a piece of wood near a tree can resemble a P, or twigs intercrossed can represent an M. There's blood splatters on the floor at one point that can be done to this like O-shaped symbol. There's another area of the game that makes you use these ravens and lines them up to be able to unlock the door as well. They're a neat mental challenge, but there's also a use of one-time mechanics in each area. Illusion portals in the Valravan area allow you to see the world a little bit differently. There's a fire trail that you need to follow so you don't get burned in Sutra's area. Swapping between worlds to access different points and different areas in a later portion. The game may follow a simple level structure, but by no means are the contents of these areas bad at all. Combat is another area that is also serviceable to the game. It's slow and simple, but perfectly executed. You have a light attack, a heavy attack, and a melee attack, which is usually your fist and not a sword or a kick. You have the parry and block, and you have a dodge. There is also 2 additional elements that you gain later on in the game, which is a focus mirror, which allows you to slow down time. There is also a sword that you will get that when you charge it does damage to enemies that start off in this like ghost form. Dodging and perfectly parrying will be your main goals here when you want to stun enemies and gain an advantage. It will also help you build up more focus if you parry enemies as well. Combat encounters will get progressively harder and the enemies will get stronger throughout the game, including a few boss encounters, but due to there being no HUD, you are literally fighting for your life every single time you are in combat. This once again keeps you engaged within the world and doesn't pull you back because you know that you're close to dying. You can kind of tell at times, but there's no health bar or anything like that that can kind of pull you out. Pretty much every enemy has a telltale attack in the game that you're going to want to parry to be able to build more focus and then stun them. It's pretty simple. The only issue is that the lock-on mechanic tends to point you at enemies you don't want to fight at times, and sometimes it will flip you round and cause you to have a little bit of confusion, and then you end up getting hit, which can be a little bit frustrating. There is this natural flow that you get into later on in the game when it throws more enemies at you, harder enemies, and it can change depending on how you want to damage them. For example, they start off in this darkness or ghost form, so you have to charge up attacks to hit them in order to bring them into the real world to do more damage. There's also enemies that will fight back in certain ways that you're not expecting, so there's a little bit of variety here. Once again, it's not bad. It keeps you in the world, apart from one bug that I had where I had to reload the save purely because I died and then Senua wouldn't pull out her sword in combat, and I was basically fighting a boss, so I had to, reload, and then it fixed the issue. Combat serves to mix up the game's puzzles and the traversal encounters, and is 100% serviceable to the game. Hellblade combines its incredible storytelling, immersive visual and audio design with the simple structure of its levels, its serviceable combat to create a truly unique and immersive experience. I mention this because I tried to stream this game a few years ago and I couldn't get it to click. It had to be something I dedicated myself to do and go and play, and I'm so glad that I did. I highly recommend that you play Hellblade Senua Saga, as it's going to be a game I will remember for a very long time. When I think of benchmarks for immersion now, I will think of this game. And I hope that the second game can not only live up to this game's standards, but push past them. And I'm very excited, as we've just had some more news talking about the game just recently. It's going to be a very tough task, but I truly believe Ninja Theory are going to be able to pull it off, and I can't wait for the second game in a few weeks' time. But if you've played this game, what was your experience like? Let me know down in the comment section. I would love to discuss it. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and like this video if you really enjoyed this style of content. And if you want to come and check out all the links in the description, please do so. I've got my socials in there. And if you want to come and check me out live on Twitch, we will be streaming a lot more, please go and do that. And as always, this has been It's Jimbo, and I'll see you guys next time.